I had all types of different documents to organize different things and tons of notebooks. I mean, not that this has cured my notebook fetish. Hey friends, thanks for tuning in today. I am Jessica Lynn Medina. Welcome to my channel. This is actually one of the first videos that I'm going to be putting out. So hopefully you'll bear with me as I get my bearings, dip my toes in the YouTube water, and see what I can put out for you in terms of like storytelling, writing, graphic design, cover design, all of that good stuff. So I'm really excited to dig right in. Today, we're going to talk about Scrivener. This software is pretty much an industry standard for all writers. Even though I think I do know a few people who still prefer to use Word, I have no idea how they do it because once I converted over to Scrivener, it was like night and day. I think I used Word. I know I used Word to write my very first books back in like middle school and high school that I never ended up finishing. I tended to have issues with starting manuscripts and writing them and then never picking them up again. But I did write my first legitimate book in college within Word, and it was a mess. I had all types of different documents to organize different things and tons of notebooks. I mean, not that this has cured my notebook fetish. I still have tons of notebooks, but I'm able to go in and transfer them over to Scrivener and have a just general cohesive look at my entire manuscript and the project as a whole. Scrivener is a software that allows you to organize your entire project from start to finish, not just the writing itself, but all of the components that go into that, from plotting to character design to places in your manuscript, even things like notes or scraps that you're going to be using later. It kind of just keeps it all in one single place. And something else that I particularly love is that it will sync with Dropbox. So if you want to work on your manuscript across different devices, you can do that as well. I recently just bought an iPad and I got the fancy keyboard with it. Spent a lot of money on it. Thank you, Mac. But it has been revolutionary for me in writing the sequel to my first book because I'm able to write in my office on my MacBook, which is a big honka 15-inch heavy thing. And then if I want to maybe go to the front porch and write, I can take my iPad and do it there. I've been finally able to go back to coffee shops just in the past couple weeks, I think. So that has been so nice to carry my little iPad and I still have access to Scrivener. I've got my entire manuscript on there, all of my notes, all of my characters, and it is so easy to work with. You know what? Let's just dive right into the screen share and I'll show you some more. Okay, so first things first, we open Scrivener 3. That's what I'm going to be working off of today. It is the most recent version. I think they just released that one for PC, so definitely I highly recommend upgrading. The whole user interface is just really nice. It's so much prettier than before, and I think they've added a lot of cool features as well. So definitely think about upgrading if you haven't already. So first things first, they offer a bunch of different options here in terms of if you're writing a fiction book or nonfiction, screenwriting, those types of things. Scrivener will, based on what you choose here, it kind of opens a template already with kind of a general setup and layout, which I love because it kind of takes, some of the initial setup stuff out of it. So what we're going to start with is fiction. I'm going to select novel and I'm going to select create. And immediately it's going to ask me to title it. I'm going to call this one Test. I already have another one in there. I'm saving it into my Dropbox because another really cool feature about Scrivener is that you can sync it to Dropbox and then access it anywhere from any other computer as long as you are logged in, which I have loved because that means I can work on my manuscript on my MacBook, but I can also access it on my iPad Pro when I'm on the go or things like that, which has been so amazing at finishing my first draft of my second book because I just can't even tell you how nice it is to be able to go from one device to another and still have my entire manuscript, the entire project as a whole at my fingertips. And right now it is building the whole project. Again, Scrivener has a general layout already, which I'm going to go over my favorite features from that and what I kind of like toss and what I use when I'm creating. All right, so here we go. It has fully opened. This is the initial thing that you're going to see when you start a new Scrivener file. It gives you a kind of tutorial here in writing in terms of like how to compile. That's when you're pulling the whole manuscript together to export it, how to make changes and all those different things. Feel free to read through this so that you can get a better handle on what you can do and how to do it. So I recommend that. However, that being said, the one thing that I definitely go ahead and first do is I move this to trash because I don't want it in there clogging stuff up. I also don't use this front matter and all of this information as well when I go about exporting for print and for ebook compilation. I do that all from InDesign and from Vellum. So I use totally different softwares. I really only use Scrivener to write and to organize all of my thoughts and to organize my plot. So I immediately will go ahead and get rid of that. And then that leaves us with some very basic things. So we have the manuscript as a whole. We've got characters, we've got places, notes, research, template sheets. They do provide you with this very nifty kind of outline for your setting sketches and your character sketches, which you really should be doing for all of your characters anyways. I kind of go about it in a different way. I don't use these exact things, but it is a great starting point to work with here. And that's essentially all I do to set up a project from the very start. And now I'm gonna hop over to a example that I've done so that we can take a deeper look. All right, so now we have the full filled out example of what it looks like once I've gone in and filled everything in within Scrivener. So for this particular project, I actually used A Court of Mist and Fury as our example. So hopefully you've read that and you're familiar with it. If not, I highly recommend you pick up that series. It's by Sarah J. Maas. It is so good and they are so long, so it will take you ages to finish it, but it's totally worth it. I mean, unless you're like me and you kind of just devour them all at once, but. Okay, so now we can take a bigger look at how this is actually set up. So in the manuscript itself, it is broken down into chapters and scenes. This is how I go about organizing my work as well. I will divide the chapters as a folder, and then within each folder or each chapter, I have all of my different scenes. And you can go through and take a look at these. One of the most beneficial things I think Scrivener can offer is that you can easily rearrange these things just by clicking and dragging. So if I have a scene that maybe isn't working in a particular section of my book, I can just click and drag it to an entirely different section and maybe rework it a little bit, and it is done. It is amazing to work this way. I can't even tell you. Another thing that I like to do when I'm going in and actually writing is a lot of times I'll plot out the scenes ahead of time, and I will not actually write them down, but I will go in, click this little plus sign down here, which creates a new scene. And then instead of actually writing within the document, which is where you're going to type, I go over here into notes and maybe I'll write down what I want the scene to look like. I might put it in synopsis as well, because up here in the corner, we have these nifty tools that can change the way that you're actually looking at a specific chapter or a selection. So maybe I go to chapter 2 here, and instead of looking at the manuscript version, which is the default selection here, we can go to this little index card version, which shows them very easily at a glance. And anything you have in the synopsis is going to show up here. If you don't have anything in the synopsis, then it will default to the text that you have there as well, which is super easy to see at a glance what you're working with, what's in the scene, and how to rearrange it. You can also rearrange things in this format as well. So it's really just like having little index cards that you can move around. And then there's a third way that you can view it, which is in this kind of list format view, which is, I don't really use this that much for writing itself. Sometimes I'll do it for organizing my edits when I'm going through and working on edits, or if I'm looking at word targets or things like that, this is a nifty way to keep that stuff organized. But definitely when I'm writing an individual scene, I will be in the manuscript version. Another thing I absolutely love about Scrivener is that once you're in here, you can go into a full screen composition mode, which we'll actually see how that works here in the screen recording. And this is absolutely amazing to work with because it blocks everything else out, and you can put on this, it's like a typewriter feed as well. So as you're typing in new content, the entire thing will scroll just like a typewriter. So you don't have to see all the stuff up above you. You're just kind of looking at the center of the screen and it's moving along with you, which is so nice and such an easy way to keep yourself like focused on what you're working on. I'm gonna pop out of that. Okay, so now that we've kind of gone over how to basically set up your chapters and scenes within chapters and work on the writing and make notes and your synopsis and change your views, I'm gonna go in and delete that little guy. The other thing I love about Scrivener is that we can look at these beautiful ways to organize your characters. You can see them all at a glance very easily. If you forget what a character looks like, you can come in here. Something that I love to do when I'm creating characters is I'll actually go and I have like a whole pin board for each new project I'm working on, and I'll either choose celebrities or even just photography models that I feel like look like the characters, or I will have an idea of a character and find a celebrity or photography model that pretty much encompasses exactly what I'm visualizing in my head. I might make edits to that within Photoshop if the eye colors are different or something like that. So whatever I'm pasting into these character designs are exactly how I see them in my head. So I don't even necessarily have to look at written down text like blue eyes, blonde hair, fair skin, that type of thing. I can just go in and look at the photo itself and immediately I'm reminded exactly what this character looks like. That being said, while we can look at these in photo format, I can also go directly into the character. And this is where you're gonna find the full layout of who the character is, the background they're working with, miscellaneous information about them. And Scrivener provides this kind of template for you to work off of. I use my own personal one. I really like to use the Enneagram when I'm working with it. So a lot of times I'll have the Enneagram number at the very top, along with like their motivating fears and what drives them and those types of things. I'll include that here as well. But if you want that photo to show up, all you do is you like paste the photo in here and you click and drag it over onto this little synopsis area. And that's what's gonna get it to show up under your character format. Now it's important to note, if you want to look at it this way, it's got to be under the index card version. If you just go to the manuscript version, it's gonna just line them up that way. And then you can also look at this in the drop down kind of like folder layout version, which again, I don't use that often. I use that during plotting, which I'm gonna get to next. So this is a really convenient, really nifty way to work with this. You can also have scenes within, scenes, it's really just basic notes here that I put underneath each character. So once I've gone and created a character, a lot of times I'm working on background information. I might write out a whole chapter or, thousands of words on their backstory. I might write a whole scene from their childhood or their trauma or something like that. And I will put that underneath each character so that I can access it quickly at any time, or if I need to remind myself of their backstory, that's where I will put that. And I generally do that for most of my characters, certainly every main character, and absolutely every character that has a point of view that I'm looking through. So I highly recommend you work with that. And this is a great way to keep it all organized and concrete and easy to look through and reference back to. So now that we've gone over the character design, We also have this awesome option within Scrivener to work with places, which essentially kind of works the same way as characters, except it's a different designation. And you do the exact same thing. So when I'm under places and I'm looking on the index card view, I can see everything at a glance here. And again, this is for A Court of Mist and Fury. So I've got the map of Prythian, I've got the Archeron Cottage, I've got Velaris and the Spring Court. And those are, you know, you can, when you're working on conceptualizing your entire work, you can pop in all the major places here so you can keep them at the top of your mind easily. And then, just like with characters, if I click on one specifically, I can go in and look at all the specific information of that particular location, which you can put in here. Again, I don't really use the Scrivener outline, but it's a great place to start when you're working on these. And again, just like characters, you'll be putting the picture here right in the little synopsis area, and that's where it gets it to show up within your index card version when you're in the places. And I also generate my places. Again, I use Pinterest to kind of conceptualize everything. I recommend that. Highly, highly recommend it if you are working on creating a world, especially any type of world building. It'll really help keep everything cohesive and in your mind. And a lot of times I'll pull up the Pinterest board while I'm writing so I can have it easy reference, because I don't always put every visual I collect into my Scrivener project. I kind of work in tandem with Pinterest. All right, so now that we've gone over the writing, the characters, the places, then we get into how I use Scrivener to plot. I'm probably going to do an entire video on this, so I'm just briefly going to touch on this. My favorite way to plot is by using the 7-point plot structure, which I'll probably do an entire video on that as well, because it is so useful to work with and conceptualize and visualize your entire story if you are, struggling with how to set it up. So essentially, I use this as a way to craft each of my individual plots. I have a plot for each main character, which I go through and plot out the 7 points for each character's arc. I also have the 7 points for the main action plot, which is going to be all of the big action points that are happening in my story. My books are generally very action heavy. I really like action adventure, sci-fi, fantasy, those types of things. So it really helps me to have that specific plot on its own as well, which helps drive the story along with those character arc plots. And then I also do another plot because romance is always a huge part of my stories. I love it so much. So I want to make sure that that's really fleshed out and perfectly done. So I will do a whole separate 1 through 7 plot point layout for the love plot as well. And once I've gone in and done all of these for all my main characters that I'm seeing viewpoints from, as well as the action and the love plot, I go in and weave them all together, which makes it so easy to do in Scrivener. Sometimes I might start this process out with actual physical sticky notes on like a whiteboard, and then I transfer them into Scrivener, and it works the exact same way as a whiteboard would. So if I'm, for instance, in the action plot and I go look at my little index card version, I can see all these very easily. Ideally, there would be text in here explaining what is your beginning state, what is the plot turn 1, what is the pinch 1, what is the midpoint, pinch 2, plot turn 2, and the end. And I do that for each of these main storylines that I'm following. And this is where I really love Scrivener, because once I've gone through and plotted out every single element of my main arcs that I want to cover, I can go in and physically kind of copy them and move them around into some cohesive, like, weaving. I call this plot weaving, because I'm essentially taking all these different threads, weaving them together so important things cross over each other at the same time to create a sense of urgency and impact for the reader. And this is where I really love it, because you can go into the weaving and select this version. And boom, it's all laid out perfectly for me. So I can go in and make sure everything corresponds beautifully and have certain elements overlap at the same time and create some type of cohesion to help guide me along the way in writing. So I'll probably go into more in depth of how I work with that at a later point in time and what the 7-point plot structure is, but this is essentially how I work with it to begin with. And each plot point is labeled correctly according to which arc it's following, so I can see when certain things have overlaps and different things that I want to have happen at the same time. So a major point in Cassian's story might happen at the exact same time as a major point in maybe the action plot, and that'll make things more impactful for the reader. And then in the Scrivener setup, we also have this additional section called scraps, which I love, because when you're going back in and working on edits and revisions, you're going to end up with scenes that you're not going to use, maybe certain elements you had to take out, and this is where I always leave those. In this particular one, I have the Cassian and Nesta extra scene at the end of the book that wasn't included, which is an excellent example because I'm sure Sarah J. Maas wrote that as an aside, maybe like some extra backstory, and they realized it would be really good to let everybody read that. So that's a perfect example of some type of scrap that you can have left over. And a lot of times I will scrap things and then use them later in different areas, repurpose it in another book even, or save it for next book in the series. And then we have an entire section for notes, which you can create sub-documents in as well as the research. And then your template sheets, which is again that character and setting sketches, which if you lose those, you can always copy them from here and reuse them as well. And then we've got a trash. Anything you send to trash is never like fully deleted. It always ends up in the trash. So you can always access it there. And there you have it, guys. That is my complete guide to using Scrivener. I'm kind of just touching the surface here in terms of how I use it and what specific elements I like. If there are other things that you want to know, please leave a comment below and let me know if you enjoyed the video, if you're gonna find it useful. I will probably do a whole nother video on the 7-point plot structure because I love that approach to plotting my books. I'm a huge plotter. I might do a few more videos in the future outlining how specifically to do more in-depth things within Scrivener. So if there's something that you want to see, please let me know so that I can work that into the next video. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed what you saw, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so that you can stay up to date on all of the new videos that I'm putting out. Like I said, I am just scratching the surface of what I'm getting into here, and I'm going to be experimenting with a bunch of different stuff, all based around storytelling and graphic design and writing, and going into behind the scenes of indie publishing and everything that goes along with that, because this is what I do now. All right, I will see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in.